Okay, so are you ready to have your mind blown? Today we're diving deep into the fascinating world of animal communication with Dr. Arik Kershenbaum and his 2024 book, Why Animals Talk. And let me tell you, this goes way beyond just cute animal sounds.
Absolutely. Dr. Kirshenbaum goes beyond simply translating small vocalizations. He digs into those big questions like, why do animals communicate the way they do? And what can their sounds teach us about how human language began?
So it's more than just learning how to say hello to a dolphin. It's like we're trying to understand what made their communication system so complex in the first place.
Exactly. What I find fascinating is how Dr. Kirshenbaum challenges that whole idea that animals think like us, just, furry little humans. Their communication isn't about, replicating our social anxieties or making small talk.
Right, it's about survival, keeping their social groups together, and adapting to their specific environments.
Precisely. Take wolves, for example. They're highly social with a complicated communication system, but it's totally different from ours.
And their howls are like the most iconic example of that.
Yeah.
Dr. Kershenbaum talks about how one wolf howl can carry information for miles. It's like their own acoustic beacon in those huge territories.
And those howls, they're not just simple cries, they're nuanced. They're packed with information about each wolf, which pack they belong to, and even their emotions.
So someone who knows wolves well could listen to a howl and tell if it's a lone wolf searching for its pack or a leader getting ready for a hunt.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting. Dr. Kirshenbaum dives into this debate about whether these howls are, hardwired genetically or learned through experience.
Like that nature versus nurture thing, but for wolf communication. What's the answer?
Well, there's evidence for both sides. Some researchers say wolves raised alone still develop some basic howl patterns, which points to genes, but others argue those subtle differences in howls between wolf populations, almost like regional dialects, mean learning, and social stuff plays a big role.
So it's not one or the other, it's both. A mix of inborn abilities and environmental influences that shape their vocal range.
Precisely. Dr. Kirshenbaum even suggests a third possibility, that a wolf's howls adapt and change over its life based on things like pack size, territory, even the acoustics of their environment.
So a wolf in a dense forest might develop a howl that travels better through trees, while a wolf on the open tundra might have a longer, more resonant howl to cover those distances. Wow, that's incredible.
It really shows how adaptable animal communication systems are. They're always being shaped by this interplay of genetics, learning, and environmental pressures.
Makes you wonder if we could use some of these insights to understand how human language developed. Are there connections in the way kids learn language, like a mix of being hardwired for it and being exposed to sounds and rhythms of their native language?
It's some fascinating research, for sure. And Dr. Kirshenbaum suggests that by studying animal communication systems like those of wolves, we could learn a lot about the general principles of communication evolution, maybe even shedding light on the origins of our own language faculty.
It reminds us that even though we're different, there is these fundamental connections between us and animal communication systems. Connections just waiting to be discovered. Now, from howling wilderness to the depths of the ocean, let's dive into the fascinating world of dolphin communication.
Dolphins, right. They've always captured our imaginations with their intelligence and, their complex social interactions. But what do we actually know about what's encoded in their intricate whistles and clicks?
Yeah, it seems like every few years there's a new study saying they've cracked the code of dolphin language. But Dr. Kershenbaum seems to take a more, measured approach. Like he's really focusing on what the scientific evidence actually tells us.
Exactly. And one of the most interesting things about dolphin communication is what researchers call signature whistles. These are unique vocalizations specific to each dolphin. They act like names, letting them identify each other in the vast ocean.
So it's like having a name tag, but instead of wearing it, they whistle it. That's wild.
Precisely. Imagine trying to keep track of all your friends and family in a huge three-dimensional underwater world with no visual cues. These signature whistles are crucial for maintaining their social bonds and navigating dolphin society.
It makes you wonder how these whistles even develop. Are they genetically pre-programmed, or do they learn their unique whistle from their mothers, or other dolphins in their pod?
That's something Dr. Kirshenbaum explores, and the evidence points to learning and vocal imitation. Young dolphins develop their signature whistles over time by trying out different sounds and refining them until they have that one that makes them stand out from the others.
So it's like their version of finding their voice, shaping their identity through sound. It's amazing to think about the social pressure and learning involved in that.
Absolutely. And it highlights another parallel between us and animal communication. We develop language in a social context, learning from those around us. Dolphins are the same. They rely on social interaction and learning to acquire those unique communication skills.
It makes you wonder if dolphins ever get tired of hearing each other's signature whistles all the time, especially in those massive pods. It'd be like a constant chorus of names just echoing through the water.
Haha, that's a funny thought. But sound travels differently underwater, and dolphins have incredible hearing. They can filter out specific sounds and focus on what's important to them, even in all that noise.
Like having a built-in acoustic filter, so they can tune out all the unimportant noise and focus on the conversations that matter.
Exactly. Now, while signature whistles give us a glimpse into dolphin identification and social recognition, it's just one piece of the puzzle. They make so many other sounds: clicks, squawks, high-pitched whistles, pulsed calls.
So what's the deal with all those other sounds? Are they just like random noises, or is there more to it?
That's what's puzzled researchers for ages. Dr. Kershenbaum gets into the debate about whether these non-signature whistles have more complex meanings, or if it's more like a constant chatter, just conveying simple stuff about location or emotional state.
So maybe complex communication, or just the dolphin version of saying, hey, over here.
Exactly. There's no definitive answer just yet, but Dr. Kershenbaum suggests that even those seemingly simple sounds likely play an important role in how they coordinate their behavior as a group, navigate, and maintain those social bonds.
It's a good reminder that we shouldn't underestimate how complex animal communication systems are, even if we don't understand them yet.
Absolutely. And that leads us to another fascinating group of vocal learners, parrots. They're known for mimicking human speech, but what does their vocal talent tell us about how smart they are and the possibility that language can evolve in multiple ways?
All right, let's talk parrots. They're like the ultimate mimics. But is their talking just a cool party trick, or is there more to it?
That's a question that's been on the minds of scientists and bird lovers for centuries. And Dr. Kershenbaum, he really digs deep into this. He explores the world of parrot cognition, trying to figure out if their vocal abilities are just mindless repetition or a sign of something, well, bigger.
So are they just mimicking, or do they get what they're saying?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And it's not an easy one to answer. But Dr. Kershenbaum points to some pretty compelling evidence that suggests parrots can do much more than just repeat what they hear.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, there's the famous case of Alex, the African gray parrot. Dr. Irene Pepperberg studied him. Alex learned to recognize and name over 100 objects. He could identify colors and shapes and even understood same and different. He could even put words together in new ways to say what he wanted, like asking for a specific treat.
Wow, Alex was like the Einstein of parrots. It's hard to believe an animal could understand those kinds of concepts.
It really challenges what we think we know about animal intelligence, right?
Yeah.
And Alex wasn't alone. Other parrots have shown similar abilities, so it's not just these one-off cases. There's something about the parrot brain that makes them really good at vocal learning and maybe even a basic understanding of language.
It's incredible to think these creatures we often see as just, feathered entertainers might have cognitive abilities that even rival our closest primate relatives.
It really is. And while no one's claiming parrots can, hold a conversation about Shakespeare, their vocal flexibility and brain power offer valuable insights into all the different ways communication systems can evolve.
So parrots might not be composing poems, but their vocalizations probably serve a far more complex purpose than we think. They could be using their skills to navigate their social circles, attract mates, even talk about food and danger.
Exactly. And this is where it gets even more interesting. Parrots, unlike a lot of other vocal birds, they live in these complex social groups. You've got hierarchies, shifting alliances, strong pair bonds.
So it's not just about individual smarts, it's about the social pressures that force communication to evolve.
Exactly. Which leads to a big question. How does the way parrots are socially structured influence their communication styles?
It's like asking how living in a huge city with millions of people shapes the way we talk compared to, say, living in a small, isolated village. The demands are different, and so are the solutions.
Precisely. Parrots, with their incredible vocal flexibility and ability to mimic, have developed some amazing ways to deal with these complex social landscapes. They use a whole range of sounds, from harsh squawks to melodic whistles, to communicate all kinds of messages and signal their intentions to others in their flock.
And those whistles, they're not just random squawks, right?
Not at all. Dr. Kershenbaum explains that those whistles can be really complex, like signals, almost advertising the parrot's cognitive and physical abilities.
It's like a parrot singing karaoke to impress a mate. The more complex the song, the more attractive they are.
Exactly. It's a fascinating example of how communication isn't just about sharing information. It's a way to show off, establish dominance, and attract a mate.
Okay, that makes sense. But I have to ask about those parakeets that build those crazy apartment-style nests. Is that a sign of complex communication and cooperation?
You'd think so, right? But Dr. Kershenbaum's observations show something kind of surprising. While they're really good at building those elaborate nests, there's not a whole lot of actual communication or coordination going on during construction.
Wait, so they're just winging it?
Seems like it. Dr. Kershenbaum describes it as more random than cooperative, with pairs often getting in each other's way more than actually helping. They might have the ability for complex communication, but they're not really using it for this particular task.
That's hilarious. It's like those couples who try to put furniture together and end up arguing more than building anything.
It's true. It's a good reminder that even with the ability to communicate in complex ways, animals don't always use it in ways we'd expect. Their behavior is influenced by so many things: their environment, what they need socially, their evolutionary history.
It's like having a toolbox full of tools, but only using a hammer and screwdriver.
Yeah.
Just because they have the potential doesn't mean they'll use it.
Exactly, and that's what makes studying animal communication so cool. There's always something new to uncover, something that challenges our assumptions and helps us understand the natural world even better.
Speaking of challenging assumptions, let's move on to a creature that might seem, well, a bit unassuming at first glance, but holds the surprising clues about the evolution of syntax, which is, of course, a fundamental part of language as we know it.
Oh yeah. Get ready to meet the hyrax. This little mammal has a communication secret that just might blow your mind.
Okay, a hyrax. I gotta be honest, I'm drawing a blank here. What is a hyrax?
So imagine like a cross between a guinea pig and a rabbit, but it's actually more closely related to elephants.
Really?
Yeah. These little guys, their social mammals might not be the most striking creatures out there, but their communication. It's got this secret that might just change how we think about language evolution.
Okay, now I'm really interested. What's the secret? Are these mini elephants trumpeting out complex messages?
Not exactly trumpeting, but they definitely have an impressive vocal range. Male hyraxes, get this, they're singers. They use these really complex songs with whistles, wails, chucks, even snorts to, show they're the boss and attract mates.
So like a hyrax karaoke battle, most eligible bachelor.
Exactly. But here's the mind-blowing part. Their songs, they're not just complex, they've got syntax.
Wait, hold up, syntax? Like grammar. In a hyrax song. Seriously, that seems like a huge leap for an animal that looks like it should be in a petting zoo.
I know, right? Seems crazy, but that's what Dr. Kershenbaum's research shows. He says the order of the sounds, it matters. It's not just random noises. They're arranging those sounds in a specific way, like grammar in our sentences.
Wow, that's amazing. So even a hyrax can develop syntax. I mean, that makes you wonder, are there other animals out there that are way smarter than we give them credit for? Maybe we're just not listening the right way.
That's the big question, isn't it? We're always focused on the smart animals, like primates. But what about all the others? The hyrax definitely makes us rethink those assumptions about how language came to be.
For sure. It's like they say, you can't judge a book by its cover. And speaking of assumptions, let's talk chimps, our closest living relatives. You'd think if any animal was going to have a human-like language, it'd be them, right?
It makes sense. They're super smart and have complex social lives. And yeah, chimps have been in those big language experiments, the ones everyone's heard of.
Like Washu, the chimp who learned sign language. That was groundbreaking, but people still debated if she actually understood the signs or if she was just mimicking.
Yeah, that's a big debate about ape language. Dr. Kershenbaum gets into it, talking about the impressive stuff chimps like Washu did, learning all those signs, even combining them in new ways, but also the limitations. Like, they didn't really grasp the symbolic and grammatical complexities of human language.
So they can use symbols for objects and actions, but not really hold, deep conversations about their hopes and dreams.
Exactly. Dr. Kershenbaum says one key difference is that chimp communication, as complex as it is, it's mostly about the here and now. Immediate stuff, like what's going on around them or their social interactions. Human language, though, it lets us talk about abstract things, future plans, share complex ideas across generations through stories, writing, all that.
It's like the difference between texting about what you want for dinner and writing a whole novel about food and culture. Both use language, but the scope, the complexity, totally different.
Exactly. But even if chimps aren't out there composing symphonies, their communication is still really important. It gives us clues about the basic building blocks of language and those social pressures that might have pushed it to evolve.
Totally. So chimps are on one end of the spectrum, super intelligent, but not quite human-like language. But what about those times when humans seem to communicate with animals in the wild, like those honey guides in Africa? They actually lead people to beehives.
Oh, yeah. That's a really cool example of interspecies communication. Those birds have figured out how to cooperate with humans. They use specific calls and behaviors to guide people to honey. And we've developed signals back, like whistles or calls, to communicate with the birds.
It's like they've got this basic shared language, kind of like an interspecies trade information for a sweet treat. But is it really communication, or are we just, projecting human stuff onto the birds?
That's a question Dr. Kershenbaum digs into. He says that even without a shared vocabulary or perfect grammar, communication can happen through shared experiences. Both the honey guides and humans benefit, so they've developed this system of signals and responses that works for both.
It's a reminder that communication isn't all about words, right? It's about sending a message. And that can happen in some pretty surprising ways. We see it with the honey guides, but also with tons of other animals, bees doing those intricate dances, monkeys with their alarm calls.
Exactly. And that's really the core of Dr. Kershenbaum's argument, that life in every form relies on communication. From bacteria sending chemical signals to whales singing their complex songs, communication drives everything. How we interact, how we adapt, the whole tapestry of life on Earth.
It's like this giant, intricate symphony, and each species adds its own unique melody.
I love that analogy. And the more we learn about all these different melodies, the more we understand how everything is interconnected, how we adapt and evolve.
So as we get to the end of this incredible journey into animal communication with the wolves and the dolphins, even those surprisingly sophisticated hyrax songs, what does it all mean? What really stood out to you from Dr. Kershenbaum's research?
It's funny. It's the sheer variety of communication styles out there that always blows me away. It's easy to get hung up on finding a language just like ours, but what Dr. Kershenbaum does so well is show us that each species has developed its own way of communicating, shaped by their environment, their social structures, their own unique evolution.
It's like nature is this incredible inventor, always coming up with new ways to communicate. From the chemical signals of ants to those bioluminescent displays in the deep sea, it's amazing.
It really is. And even though we may never completely understand every chirp or growl or whistle, we are learning that the animal kingdom is buzzing with information. These aren't just random sounds. They're sending vital messages about everything: food, danger, who's who in the group, even emotions.
It makes you think about our own place in the world, doesn't it?
Wow.
We often see language as what separates us from animals, but the more we learn, the less clear-cut that seems.
Right. Dr. Kershenbaum talks about that too. He argues that a lot of those basic parts of human language, like recognizing patterns, understanding what causes something else, even expressing emotions, they're found in other species, often in ways we're only starting to grasp.
So instead of a hard line between us, it's more like a spectrum of how complex communication can be, with humans at one end, but other animals showing remarkable abilities too.
Exactly. And that leads to a really interesting question. What made humans move towards that more complex end? What pushed us to develop language as we know it?
Is it as simple as brain size?
Oh,
Or are there other things involved?
that's where it gets really fascinating. Brain size is part of it, sure, but Dr. Kershenbaum thinks the real driver was how much more complex human social life became. As our ancestors started forming bigger, more interconnected groups, they needed better ways to communicate, to work together, to share what they knew, and to navigate all those social relationships and hierarchies.
It's like the difference between surviving in a small nomadic group and building entire civilizations with cities, agriculture, all those complicated social structures.
Yeah.
Communication would have had to become way more advanced.
Exactly. And language, which lets us think abstractly, use symbols, share information across time and space, it gave our ancestors this incredible tool to handle this new world.
So language itself almost became this driving force in our evolution, shaping our brains, our social structures in this kind of feedback loop.
It's a really compelling idea. And it highlights how language isn't just for communication, it's a fundamental part of being human.
It's what lets us tell stories, build cultures, create art, even try to answer those big questions about life. It reminds us that we have this unique place in the world, but that we're still connected to this much larger web of communication that stretches across the planet.
Beautifully said. We may never completely understand how human language began, but by studying how other animals communicate, we gain this deeper appreciation for the amazing journey that led us to our capacity for thought, expression, and connection.
This has been such an incredible journey into the world of animal communication. We've only scratched the surface, but I feel like we've gained this whole new perspective on the natural world and where we fit in.
And hopefully it'll make our listeners want to keep exploring, keep listening, and keep asking questions about that incredible symphony of communication all around us. Who knows what we might find if we just open our ears and our minds to the possibilities.
Well said. And on that note, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of animal communication. Until next time, keep those ears perked and those minds curious.